I strongly believe we should not allow any other nation from now forward to obtain nuclear weapons, and that includes those two that are agitating, Iran and North Korea, that are really forcing us to accept it as inevitable, that within a number of years there will be nuclear powers. That we should not allow, ever. And that is our responsibility. And not only that, but that is the only way that we hold the key for the future of this nation and these generations to come. Not just for this nation, but for all the nations of this earth. So do we want to risk that, our continuous existence, by simply not taking decisive action today? I suspect not. So, I want to always remind ourselves that our choice is not going to war versus maintaining peace. Our choice is simply, and again, I don't use the words going to any conflict. I'm just saying simply to remove the nuclear capability of an enemy and allow them to continue their business as they are best able to, without being involved anymore in their own affairs. And then continue on our life as well, but under the edges of the alliance. I'll take more questions. Sir, please.
Actually, I don't have a question, I have a comment. And that is that while I appreciate the sort of platitude that we need to cooperate and that it's important to find ways to eliminate problems on Earth, the fact is that it's much more complicated than that. As Tim suggested, that we have more than just North Korea nuclear weapons at stake here. And when we talk about developing alliances, it really requires some common interest. And as Tim pointed out, when you look at China and the United States, we have fundamentally different views of what North Korea represents. So to suggest that the United States can develop an alliance with China to take out a nuclear weapons site is just simplistic to the point of not being feasible. I think we've come to realize that over the years. When we first thought about doing that in the 1990s, that may have been something that we could have done. The fact is at this point, that's no longer an option. You can't simply take out a site and assume that you've actually eliminated nuclear weapons in North Korea. So while I appreciate the overall concept that you're trying to present, the fact is that reality on the ground is much more complicated. You also have nuclear weapons in other places, not just North Korea. So if you want to make an argument about eliminating nuclear weapons, of course, that's part of the non-proliferation treaty, is that everyone promised that we would do this at some point, although not in our lifetime. So, I mean, I think, like I said, I appreciate the overall concept, but the reality of it is much more complicated, and developing alliances to achieve that are also as complicated.
Thank you very much. Somebody else has a comment, please.
Yeah, a couple of follow-ups. Certainly on your case, it's a lot more complicated than I think of that. There's no question that China sees North Korea as a buffer zone, and under no circumstances do they want a nation with United States troops on the Yalu, even if the troops don't move north. Nobody has spoken yet about the missiles, non-nuclear missiles. There's 15 to 20,000 pieces of artillery on the DMZ. Some of them can shoot as many as 24 missiles at a time. So they have the capacity to shoot 100,000 rockets within the first hour if they so decide. And that's the real question. I think taking out the nuclear facilities of North Korea is simple. I don't need to be condescending, but we have enough bombs, buster bombs and so forth, to put it back 10 years, just like the Israelis did in Syria and Iraq. But Syria and Iraq did not have the capacity to kick back militarily on the Seoul. So that's number one. What do you do if they start shooting missiles? To knock out that many pieces of artillery, do we have enough weapons to do that? Do we have enough anti-weapons? So he got sold with 25 million people. So I think that's the hostage North Korea. But I'd also like to address your World War II analogy. When your grandfather, cozied up to Stalin, he did it when they were already at war, and he only did it because the Germans marched into Russia, and your father you couldn't believe his good luck on that day. But that happened, and I think he said if Hitler had invaded hell, he would have found some good words to say about the devil. He said that the next day in Parliament. And going back to your claim about, again, to Europe and the alliances, if in 1936 the French army had stopped the Rhineland, who knows what would have happened? But they didn't. And in Munich, the reason they made the peace in Munich, there would have been a war at that point. Now, your grandfather would have said, well, let's get it on. It's better then than later. So all these things we're talking about is that if we strike take out the nuclear, what are the consequences after we do that? And that goes back to Elliot's case. We don't know. Everybody plans war. They go to the war colleges. The only thing we know for sure, bad things happen. So I'd like to address the soul dilemma. Thank you.
So thank you. These are amazing comments, and certainly it gives us food for thought. But I would go back to address each one individually. Yes, extremely complex. But then again, we are here to solve complex problems. We have the capabilities both to solve them militarily as well as to solve them through the cooperation of nations. The reason why I want to invite China in this discussion and Russia, and the reason why I believe that Rex Tillerson understands the problem very well, is because I noticed that he cleaned up his calendar and his next visit is to Russia. He will not take part in the NATO proceedings and all these things. He's just going straight to Moscow. Because they understand now is the time for action. And they understand that they want these allies because there are things that Russia can impact upon North Korea to disable a lot of their capabilities. There are things that China can do against North Korea to disable a lot of their capabilities. And they have an interest here because with China we are linked in an economic interest for maintaining our open markets and maintaining our mutual support for them being the factory of the world and us being the consumers of those goods that they manufacture. They particularly enjoy that, and they do not want the crazies of North Korea to disturb that system. Neither does Russia. Russia, as you very well said, although on the public face, Winston appeared to be elated that finally Russia is coming with him. He had been working for 2 solid years diplomatically to bring Stalin to his harem, as he used to call it. He worked from the beginning when the agreement, the so-called secret agreement was made between the Russians and the Germans. Winston was working to tell Stalin what his personal interest is, Stalin's personal interest, and with whom he should ally, because he exposed to him that it is inevitable that Hitler is going to turn very much like Napoleon to take Moscow. And he did that because he knew. He went as a private citizen, poorly dressed, and he spent more than a month in Munich around the haunts of Adolf Hitler to observe personally what are these people up to. So he had personal intelligence. After this I'm going to China. I have some personal intelligence too of what's going on and where people are going and where they are heading. So I suggest, let's simplify things. Because if we overanalyze and we overcomplicate things, at the end of the day, of course, we're going to be drawn to some kind of inaction. Paralysis by analysis is the deadliest fault of complex systems. Let us solve the problem. That's why we need the alliances. That's why we need to overlook. And I believe that this particular guy, at least Rex Tillerson, by following his footpath, he clearly understands the same. And if we are at it, and we solve this problem in the very same manner, like the problem of Syrian nuclear weapons or the Iraqi nuclear problem was solved, we are going to be able to look back and say, well, we dodged a bullet. What are they going to do? We don't know once something happens. But I suspect they will not do very much. Syria did almost nothing, and so did Iraq. And perhaps this is the understanding because they also have to deal with their own self-interest. And everybody, when the chips are down, knows that they're going to survive another day. They're going to live to see the sun rising another day. And the crazy ideas they have, they all go away out the window the moment they understand that it's their own survival now that they have to attend to. So I am suggesting that we are able to solve this problem if we think along simple lines towards simple solutions. But we need a grand alliance, and we need to have all of the players focused on the simplest possible common good, a long-lasting peace, not just in the Pacific, but throughout the world, by removing the capacity of a state that is acting as a terrorist against our interests and the interests of the world community. So I wanted to close with this idea that on the elegiac, on the panegyric speech of Pericles, he spoke about democracy. We are endowed with something that other people do not have. We should act to the highest of our capacities. And we should bring out the best angels of our heart to guide us in the course of action we have to take by admitting that our friends are legion and our enemies are very few. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Appreciate your comment. So I guess our challenge is find simple solutions to complex problems. That's a big challenge, and of course, we all would like to find that solution. It certainly is food for thought on how we can solve specifically the North Korea problem with all the complexity that's gone into 30 years of thinking about that problem. Of course, it clearly is complex, just trying to unravel all the alternatives that have been sought out over the years. So it's a useful reminder that a simple solution would do as well. So with that, we're going to close. I just wanted to, as a closing comment, to say to everyone, thanks so much for the support for the board dinner. I think it was really quite a success, and I think the format of having Admiral Harris and Joe Nye sort of give alternative views on different issues was an interesting format and a useful format for people who wondered what each one of those individuals thought. And I thought that actually we came out with quite frank and open comments by them in that context. So again, thanks everyone for supporting the board dinner, and thanks for coming out this morning, and yes,